The lawyer's office, like the lawyer himself, was unexpected. In the untidy room, heaped with papers, the bookshelves overflowing into teetering stacks on the floor and chairs, Julie watched Sandro for his reaction. The man himself, Carlo Bastoni, the prop and right-hand man, suited the room. Short, stocky, rumpled, a substantial belly pushing at the buttons of a knitted waistcoat, over which a badly knotted tie sat skewiff. He held out his hand hesitantly to Sandro as he came around from behind a desk mostly hidden under the same landslide of paper that looked as if it had only recently come to rest in the room. Looking from one face to the other, Julie saw both men take each other in and relax, in Sandro's case only fractionally. Carlo Bastoni looked uncertain, as well he might. Julie had been garbled in her explanation on the phone of why they needed to talk to him. "Niccolo's fine," he'd repeated over and over again. "Why do you need to see me? There's nothing to worry about." She had said something about wanting to help, about strategy for the press, and he'd gone quiet. It was only when she'd told him she was Enzo's girlfriend that he'd agreed. They loved Enzo, the Frazione, perhaps for the same reasons Julie loved him. Because he was good, because he thought only of others, of his mother's catalogue of minor complaints, his father's emphysema, of Julie's night terrors. When she'd sit up straight in bed, gasping for air, trying to remember the things she'd forgotten or left behind to die. And when Rosselli had gone down like a ninepin on the stage, it was Enzo who, having established that Julie was all right and safely at the edge of the room, had worked his way doggedly through the crowd until he reached the man lying motionless on the wooden platform. It had been Enzo, earnest under the daft haircut that Julie had learned to love, who'd laid him on his side in the recovery position, and had cleared a space around him and loosened his shirt, checked his breathing until, after what seemed like hours, Niccolo Rosselli had begun to move. It had been Enzo, fretting all night afterwards, who had impelled Julie all the way here, nagging Sandro along too, calling and begging the lawyer to see them. A strategy for the press? On the telephone, Bastoni had seemed surprisingly unworldly for a man who'd gone all the way through law school and written learned papers on all sorts of things. He didn't even have a secretary to field his calls. But the words did seem to be getting through. "Do you think we need that?" Now he turned from Sandro to Julie, his expression brighter. "Miss Sarto," he said, and an eager note entered his voice. "I did wonder what you said about the press. As you know, we don't have a press office." And at this he looked around himself at the shambles of his office, as though wondering how it had all got there. Perhaps we do need one." "I'd say," Sandro broke in, "I'd say that right now you do. You're Frazione, you need someone to tell people what's going on." Julie saw Bastoni's face cloud. "Well," he began hesitantly. "Or don't you know yourself?" said Sandro, and it was quite apparent by the despondency with which Bastoni sat down abruptly in a small puff of dust that Sandro had hit the nail on the head. They stood, waiting, until eventually Bastoni looked back up and said, "Oh, yes, do sit down." They extracted 2 rickety chairs from the mess and sat with him around a table overflowing with paper. Julie sat on the edge of hers. "Is he really all right?" she said. Sandro sat back a little, arms folded, watching Bastoni. In a silver frame on the shelf behind the lawyer was the portrait of a sweetly smiling elderly woman, his mother, presumably. Bastoni stood up again and went to the long, dusty window. He stood there a moment in the soft, late-summer light, looking down into the street. "They told us it's something like nervous exhaustion," he said. The pouchy, olive-skinned face he turned to them, sagging with worry.